All right, guys, welcome back to Downtown Rams. As always, I'm your host, Alexis Kraft, joined here with my co host, Jake Ellenbogen. And guys, we're going to talk about a couple things today. We mostly want to talk about the Rams running back room because we know that that's a big topic of conversation amongst Rams fans right now. A lot of people are wondering what direction the running back room is going to go in. I think, Jake, a lot of people thought we were going to trade for maybe like a Dalvin Cook or something before he got released. Then he got released and people thought we might sign him, things like that. We ended up signing back Sony Michel. So we'll talk about that whole thing. But first, there was actually Rams news that dropped today for the first time in a while. So we'll cover that really quick, Jake. The Rams signed cornerback Ahkello Witherspoon to the team, which is, I can honestly say, I don't think one person has called that free agent signing. He previously played for the Steelers. Before that, the Seahawks and the 49ers. So this is his third team in the NFC West. Jake, what are your thoughts on this signing? And do you think that Witherspoon is a day one starter?
I love the signing, Alexis. It's my favorite of the offseason. I think when you look at Ahkello Witherspoon, age 28, right? So he gives you some veteran presence. We've talked about the idea of, maybe going back and, maybe getting Troy Hill back or somebody like that, maybe getting a John Johnson in the secondary. So they decided to go with Ahkello Witherspoon, who, let's be honest here, Ahkello Witherspoon is somebody that's played really well over the last, 2 of the last 3 years. The only problem is, and the reason why he's available, is that last year he dealt with a hamstring issue. And it was one of those things where it kind of lingered. Plays 4 games for the Steelers, does not play at the level he played the year prior or the year prior before that. And he ends up getting put on IR. And that's all she wrote. And the Steelers, I think when you look, they bring in Patrick Peterson. They go out and they draft 2 corners in this past draft, Joey Porter Jr. and Corey Trice. And then they trust Levi Wallace because during last year when Ahkello was injured, Levi came in and was reliable for them. So I think when you look at this, how he became available, he struggled. I mean, he had a bad year, but 2021 PFF rated him as the 17th overall corner. And 2020, PFF rated him as the 5th overall corner. So, I mean, you're talking about somebody that, in between those seasons, he only gave up 3 touchdowns in 2020 and 2021 combined. He only missed 1 tackle in 2020. And this is somebody that's gotten better each year when you take away, of course, 2022. So I think this makes a lot of sense. 1, gives you veteran presence like we talked about. 2, he's a day one starter to answer your question. 100%. He's starting on the outside. He is predominantly a boundary corner. He's going to give you that 6'2", 6'3" length. So that's great because throwing over him is going to be an issue. And, when you turn on the tape and, you watch him, there's a certain pass that's being thrown to Mark Andrews and just how his length just takes over the rep. He's able to knock the ball, harmlessly to the ground. This is just kind of who he is. He's a long-limbed guy. He's not like filled out. He's not like big, but he's a slender 6'3" corner that can give you problems. He can take away guys. And, I think at the end of the day, the Rams didn't have this length on their team aside from Robert Rochelle. He's the best corner on their team. Proven wise, I would say I like Jacoby Durant long term. I think Jacoby Durant is probably the best right now, power ranking. But if we're talking about guys that have done the most, Ahkello Witherspoon is the most proven guy in the secondary, period. And so I think you get a guy like that on June 29th, Alexis, not a lot of cap space. We talked about in our last episode, they go and they do the whole restructure with Cooper Kupp. We said that there wasn't going to be a giant move out of it. It wasn't going to be Dalvin Cook. It wasn't going to be one of those big moves. But it did lead to something like this. It led to bringing back Sony Michel, who we're going to talk about. So I love this move because he's a day one starter, veteran presence, the length, the speed. He ran a 4.4. And this guy's played at a high level. And if it was an injury thing last year, And that's the only thing that was holding him back. And the Rams are getting a top 20 corner, even top 32. I mean, this is a hell of a W for the Rams, and they need it because this defense isn't really proven. And that doesn't mean bad. That just means there's not really much you can really bank on. This, I feel like you can bank on.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he's a day one starter. You and I also discussed, earlier today when this happened, Jacoby Durant obviously now playing the slot. And I think that what it gives, if anything, it gives the Rams that veteran presence in the secondary that we no longer have. I mean, quite literally at all. And he's not that old, but he's
not
older.
An old man. He's 28, but still.
But he's been around, and he's got the experience, and so I think that's going to be really beneficial, if anything, in a mentor position to these other guys. But I think he is going to contribute right away. I think that, the secondary, especially at the corner position, is like a lot of people have been very nervous about that. And I think the Rams also as well were, considering they made this signing. So yeah, I think it's a good solid pickup. Have to admit, I was very surprised that the Rams signed somebody. If they were going to sign anybody, I thought they would go get that edge, right? Like that veteran edge rusher, something like that, maybe inside linebacker. But it makes sense. I mean, corner, I think, was definitely a position that we needed. And I think that they got, a relatively cheap option that's going to provide them, I think, a little bit more security in the secondary. So now that we've kind of talked about that signing, let's get into the running back room, which is a very fun topic of conversation amongst Rams fans. I think a lot of Rams fans feel like they don't know what to make of this running back room. That's what my interpretation of it, Jake, is like people keep trying to like fit each running back into a certain position, and they keep trying to figure out like, what's the plan? Is it Cam Akers and then everyone else? Or is it going to be more of a role position? Is Cam Akers going to have 90% of the snaps, which he pretty much did last year? Or is he going to split snaps with Kyren Williams, now Sony Michel, Zach Evans? A lot of people forget, by the way, that we drafted Zach Evans. When I see people talking about the Rams running back room, he keeps getting left out, guys. We did draft a running back in the 6th round out of Ole Miss. He's there. He exists. So don't forget his name, Zach Evans. So the signing of Sony Michel, Jake, I know that you and I feel very similar about what the reason for that signing was, but I'm going to let you explain it. What do you think the Rams' intentions were when signing Sony Michel?
I think their intentions were, look, we need a guy in the short yardage game, a guy that can pass protect, a guy that we can rely on and we trust and we know, and we're not going to spend top dollar on. And so Sony Michel was available. This is in June. Okay, let's grab him. He might not even make the roster. I'm not going to even sit here and say he's 100% guaranteed to make the roster, because here's where this, gets a little muddy. Cam Akers is guaranteed. Lock it in. I think Cam Akers, when we talk about, what kind of season, these guys, what kind of roles, think Todd Gurley with Cam Akers. Like, think like 2017, 2018, the way they used Todd Gurley a little bit. Not as much. I think more so the carries, Alexis. I think Cam is going to get those carries. Now, I think also in terms when you bring in Mike LaFleur, you have to look at how the Jets use their running backs, right? Because Mike LaFleur used their running backs. Everybody was catching passes out of the backfield, whether it be Breece Hall, whether it be Michael Carter, and so forth. I look at Cam Akers as the Breece Hall of this running back room. But Kyren Williams is I disagree with you. Kyren Williams is the guy that keeps getting left out. Like, I saw today, there was a comment, Zach Evans, like, watch out for him starting. And my thing is, this guy lost 2. Keep in mind, he transferred from TCU because he lost starting job. He also lost the starting job to Judkins at Ole Miss. So he's lost 2 starting jobs, was drafted in the 6th round. I like the guy. You like the guy. We thought it was a great pick, great value. I had a late second, early third round grade on him. So I was like, yeah, home run. But there's a reason why he fell in the 6th round. He's had injuries. People say maturity issues, all that. I can't speak on the maturity issues. He's a young kid. I don't know what to make of that. But what I will say is that Kyren Williams was on the Rams last year. Sony Michel was on the Rams when they won the Super Bowl. Ronnie Rivers was on the Rams last year. There's not a guarantee Zach Evans makes the roster. And it's not to me, it's not me saying Zach Evans has no chance. It's not me saying Sony Michel. It's not me saying Ronnie. We don't know how this is going to go. But the only thing I do know is that Cam Akers is going to be like Breece Hall for this offense. He's going to be the bell cow. And Kyren Williams is going to be Michael Carter the second. Like that's when I look at how they have everything set up. Kyren Williams is going to be that pass catching back. He's going to be the guy that comes in on third down. He's going to be the change of pace. It's going to work. Sony Michel comes in on 3rd and 1. You need a guy to punch it up the gut. Okay, Sony Michel. That doesn't really leave a lot of bandwidth for a guy like Zach Evans or Ronnie Rivers. But that's how I see it. I think they keep 4. I think Ronnie Rivers is on the practice squad. But I don't subscribe to the notion, Alexis, that Sony Michel is going to cut into Cam Akers' carries. I mean, I have Cam Akers. I just put out a projected video on my YouTube channel. And, Cam Akers, I had 251 carries for over 1,200 yards rushing. Okay. Kyren Williams, a little bit of a spoiler here because I haven't put this video out yet. But Kyren Williams, I have going over 700 total yards. That's where I feel when you combine rushing and receiving, I think Kyren is going to have over 700 total yards. I think around 3-4 touchdowns, 42 receptions, like almost 400 yards receiving. He's going to be that type of back, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Kyren isn't that back. Maybe Sony's the number 2. But based on how I'm seeing it, Alexis, I think people aren't talking about Kyren enough. We talk about the 6th rounder. They traded up to get the 5th rounder the year prior in Kyren Williams. And let's not forget, everyone loves Cam Akers now in the Rams room. Wasn't that long ago, Cam wanted out. Wasn't that long ago, the Rams were close to trading him. And it wasn't that long ago, even before that, where Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson, when they took that trip to Cincinnati, Ohio, and did that joint practice with the Bengals, it wasn't that long ago that Kyren Williams was the only running back who was working with the offense, the number 1 offense as a rookie. So they like him. And I see too many people are trying to push him out the door. And I just don't understand why. I like nothing we saw last year would deter me from believing in him moving forward.
Well, anybody who listens to our show knows how I feel about Kyren. So I don't have to, go over that, but
that wasn't
right.
At you, obviously. That was just in general.
No, I know. But I'm just, because see, I very much agree when I look at this. I think Cam Akers is going to get the vast majority of the carries. But I do think Kyren's role is the number 2 role. I don't think it's Sony Michel either. I'm excited to see what Kyren does this year. I think that he is going, you bring up last year, right? Like before Kyren got hurt and that absolutely, I will never stop being mad about how that all went down. The first play of the game of the NFL season, literally. And it deterred obviously everything. The Rams very much viewed him as that kind of hybrid running back receiver. He was in college. He was great, receiving back. He is, when you and I were watching him last year, when he finally got in, it was kind of like the last, I think 3 or 4 games of the season. He finally got cleared to play. He did not get a lot of carries because that was kind of when they were really rolling with Cam Akers and, Kyren was getting 4 touches a game. But when he did get the touches, all of them were for positive yards. I want to remind people of that. You and I were watching those games and every time that he gets the ball, it's positive. I mean, and he was doing he was showing us, I think, what the Rams were seeing before the injury. And I just think at that point, because of our season last year, the Rams were there was no playoff shot and they kind of just things weren't going their way. So I don't think that they wanted to push it with him anymore. But I do think that he is the number 2 running back this season. I think Sony Michel was a depth signing. I don't want to minimize him to a depth signing, but like if we're being honest, it feels like it was mostly like we know our history in the running back room and we kind of need to diversify the skill set a little bit. Like you said, like he's a good short yardage guy. He's very situational. So I think the Rams obviously know that. And I think that that's why they brought him in. But I like, when everybody's trying to kind of put everybody in the Rams running back room into this role, right? And figure out where everybody's going to go. I actually really like that all of our running backs are super different. I don't think the Rams have any 2 running backs on their roster that are the same type of NFL running back, legitimately, out of the 5 that they have. I mean,
the closest one I would say is Zach Evans kind of is very similar to Cam Akers.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I think that Zach Evans was brought in to be kind of that, like when you and I were talking about it in the episode where we recap the draft picks, he's kind of like that home run hitter guy.
Yeah.
I don't think he would ever be in a position where he would like be getting that many carries though in a game, like the makers will. But I think that it is a little bit worrisome if anybody was like really excited to see Zach Evans potentially get a lot of carries this year. I think obviously the signing of Sony Michel dampers that for him. I don't think it means anything about Cam Akers and Kyren Williams touches. At least it shouldn't. I don't think. I'd be very disappointed if Sony Michel was getting more playing time than Kyren Williams. I think that'd be absurd.
Yeah, I mean that really would be absurd. And
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing, okay? I understand the love for Sony, and I do not mind the signing. But we have to temper our expectations here. He did not have a good year last year, didn't play a ton last year. Running back shelf life is very short, okay? So he's getting there. He is getting to that point. And keep in mind, with the knee injury that he had, like 28 is looking maybe like he might already hit 30. You know what I mean? And so I'm saying if he's like the Malcolm Brown of this running back room, like Malcolm Brown last year, I won't be surprised. I mean, I think there's a reason, guys, they didn't use him at all in the Super Bowl. Like he barely got on the field. It was Cam Akers barely acclimated off a torn Achilles, and Darrell Henderson, who was literally playing through a high ankle sprain. Hey, Sony Michel was fully healthy. They didn't really use him, if you remember. So I always make the joke, he did more damage against the Rams in the Super Bowl on the Patriots than he did for the Rams in the Super Bowl. Because, he did. But look, with this running back room, kind of like what I was saying about Puka Nacua, it's the same thing. I think you and I are kind of out of the draft mode now, where it's easy to kind of in the moment, like, yeah, this is awesome. This is great. And when you take off the glasses, you take off the goggles, you take off the party hat and everything, and you realize, like, okay, this draft is a really good draft. I'm not hating on this draft, but you realize, like, if you're not Steve Avila, Byron Young, Kobe Turner, you're not playing really this year. Like, you're really not.
Well, it's like how you and I are in the midst of a dynasty draft right now. We're in the same dynasty.
It's almost
league.
done.
And it's almost done. It'll probably end tonight or tomorrow morning. But it's like you draft everybody, right? And they get sent to the taxi squad.
Yep.
So that's what the Rams are doing with almost, I think, in my opinion, nearly all of their draft picks this year, except for like the 3 guys you mentioned. It's like they're getting sent to the taxi squad, right? So, I think when you look at the running back room, Zach Evans, I admit, I think before the Sony Michel signing,
yes,
I was like, we're going to do like the running back trio. Obviously more like Cam Akers is probably still going to be dominant, but I was like, okay, maybe they're going to, I saw the roles were clear to me then. Then when they brought in Sony Michel, I kind of took a step back and I was like, I'm getting a little bit confused on how this is going to work. And I think now looking at it, I think that the smart and obvious play is going to be the Cam Akers, Kyren Williams show Sony Michel, very situational, and like this is almost like a redshirt year for Zach Evans. Now, knowing again, kind of recent years, the way that running backs get injured in the NFL,
That's true.
we say all this, but it could be a completely different story 3 weeks into the season. But I think that the obvious game plan right now is Cam Akers and Kyron Williams. So I think we should close out the episode talking about what we think the season is. And we touched on this a little earlier, but what we think the season is going to look like for these running backs. I mean, do you think Cam Akers, and you brought up his season last year was very drama filled and kind of like up and down, and just it was hard to predict, right? But do you think he's going to play better this season than he did last season?
I mean, it's hard to play better than the last 5 games. I don't think people understand the level Cam Akers was playing at to end the season. If you extrapolate that over a 17-game season, that's top 3 in the league at the position, period. Like, that's one of the best running backs in football. A lot of that goes down to, like, because there's context that's needed here. A lot of that, and we talked about it, you can question, like, those run defenses were not good. A lot of them were horrible. So he did take advantage of that. The offensive line did get more continuity towards the end of the year when the injuries finally turned off, I guess, a little bit. But at the same time, you can't take away too much credit, because on a team with nothing going for it on the offensive side, and as fun as it was to have Baker Mayfield, like, the offense didn't immediately fix itself, right? There were some moments, but that offense was not clicking, and firing on all cylinders, so Cam Akers, what he did for the most part, like, he kind of had to put the team on his back in that regard, and so when I look at him having a double-digit touchdown season, 1,200 yards, I feel like that's realistic. Now, there are fantasy football analysts out there that can't buy into Cam Akers, and that is what it is. But having watched every single carry he's had and watching, I think really the big thing about him, this is not the same with every player, Alexis, but with Cam Akers, it has always been, and the people I've talked to that have been around him told me the same thing. It's always about the confidence. It's not that he's not capable. It's not that he has the poor technique. He literally has a confidence issue. And when his confidence gets low, and I mean, I guess this is just human, this is human nature, right? But his confidence can dip quickly. And so that's why the Rams are not bringing in Sony Michel to take any of his carries away. A big reason why Darrell Henderson got cut halfway through the year last year is because he brought it to their attention. Like, he has to be the bell cow or it's not going to work for him. And you could say that's a little bit of a diva, a little emotional, but I kind of get what he's saying, because he's a rhythm runner. And when you take him out of his rhythm, yeah, I can work, but I'm not going to be as effective. And if you want 5 yards per carry, Cam, you want to keep me in that rhythm. And so I think the hope is he's able to capture what he did the last 5 games of the season. The reality is he's probably going to capture some of that, but I think some of that did have to do with the defense. And I've since tempered my expectations to a degree, but I do think, Alexis, going into a contract year, albeit restricted free agency, Cam Akers is going to have his best season. If he stays healthy, he's going to go over 1,200 yards, maybe more than that, 10 touchdowns, have some like presence in the passing game. I think he's an underrated pass catcher. I'll say it. When I went back and watched the film, I don't think he's utilized enough in the passing game. So I'm curious where that goes. But as far as him, like, no one is taking his carries. If, like, I have Kyron getting 81, I don't think that's bad. I don't think he's going to get a bunch of carries, though. I don't think he's going to get 10 a game. I think it's going to be more so 5 here, maybe one game he'll have 10, another he'll have 4. I think they kind of gave us a little bit of an idea of what we're going to see last year. When push came to shove, Cam Akers was the guy. Like, he was the guy. 20 carries, 22 carries, 18 carries. Around that, that's what we're going to see. but I think we're going to see a more seasoned Kyren Williams. And so I'm excited about that. I am excited about that aspect. But going to your point about the taxi squad thing, this is not like taxi squad, like being like a red shirt is not a bad thing. Like Van Jefferson was a second round pick and he didn't even have 300 yards his rookie year. This is why I say temper your expectations on Puka Nacua, who was drafted 3 rounds after Van Jefferson was drafted. And you look at like Zach Evans, again, 6th round pick. Like we've seen Chris Carson, 7th rounder, turn into something, Isaiah Pacheco. Those guys exist. I'm not saying Zach Evans can't, blow the doors off and force himself into a decent role. But I'm saying it's not extremely likely. See, rounds 1 through 3 are typically your starter rounds. Like you're getting a starter rounds 1 through 3, or you just whiffed. But for the most part, day 1, you're getting a starter. After that, it's uncommon, Alexis. It's uncommon. I'm sorry. What Jordan Fuller did doesn't get talked about enough. Being a starter on a Super Bowl caliber team out of the 6th round is just not it's not commonplace. That's not that's not a normal thing. And so we can't just assume, this guy was really good in college. We can't just assume it's going to translate instantly. And I think that's just part of kind of the process, right? Like going through the motions. And it's like, it's awesome. You get your adrenaline pumping. You're excited about the draft. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's not a guarantee these guys are going to be something special. And I think now that we're getting closer to, the NFL season and we're seeing Demarcus Robinson get picked up here and an Ahkello Witherspoon here and Sony Michel, these are signals that the Rams are kind of looking at everything. They gave it a little bit of a go in OTAs and whatnot, and they realized, we need more help here. We need more help here. And I think, that's normal. That's what good teams do. And I just think that I wouldn't rule out another move, to be honest with you. Like, I think if you're going to go that route with, what they did with Witherspoon today, if you're going to go that route and you're going to continue to try to find bargain bin guys, Dalton Risner, make the call.
Yeah. I agree with you on the outlook for the running back room. I think Cam is going to have actually a very similar season to what he had last year. And here's why I say that. Last year, we had a lot of injuries across our whole offense, right? I hope this year we don't have to rely on the running game as much. Remember that. I hope that Matthew Stafford stays healthy. I hope that we have a better receiving core. I hope that things go to where it's more of a balanced offense. I think that what we ended up seeing last year, I mean, not to take away from, Baker Mayfield, but, we started to see the Rams really have to rely on the run game. So I think that actually it's, in my opinion, I think that Cam is going to have a very similar season to what he had last year, but it's going to be more spread out over the course of 18, games, as opposed to just hopefully, the team not falling apart and then everything having to get shuffled around. But I think that he's going to have an above average season, obviously, for a running back. And I also agree with Kyren. I think that he is hopefully going to be involved a lot more. I would personally like to see him run the ball more. I think that he obviously is, because we have Cam Akers, he's getting looked at more as a receiving back, but he's also very good at running the ball. And we did see him run the ball, the few carries that he got last season. And he did great. He didn't get any negative yards. He is very shifty. He's a very good running back when he runs the ball. So I'm hoping that the Rams, do give him the opportunity at least to rush the ball. I think that he obviously the way that he contrasts to Cam Akers is I think he's a better receiving back. So I think he is going to be used in the receiving game. And that was something they already did before he got injured last season, was they were using him a lot in the receiving game. So we'll see. I mean, the hope is that this offense stays healthy, so Rams have the flexibility to kind of experiment a little bit with, I think, how they use this running back room, who's used for what, and that nobody's forced into any, type of role because things fall apart again. I think that, my expectation is that we're not going to have as run heavy as an offense this season as we did last season. But we'll see. I mean, who knows? Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I just think if everybody stays healthy, we'll have more of a balanced offense. Or I can dream.
Yeah, I think that they, believe it or not, I actually disagree. I think they're going to run more. And the reason I say that is because I think you got to protect Matthew Stafford, and I think the best way to do that is keep his pitch count on track. Like if he's constantly taking snaps, in the shotgun and so forth, it doesn't matter how good your offensive line is. It's just more snaps that you're putting him into harm's way. It's more chances for somebody to hit him. And he's going to get hit. He's the quarterback. And I'm not worried about his age, but it's just those injuries, the back injury and so forth. Like I could see them running the ball more. And I think honestly, part of that is why I think they brought in Mike LaFleur, because I think they wanted to, kind of pivot a little bit more to the run game. They didn't even have 330 carries this year for running backs. The most they ever had was 2017. That's if you include Tavon Austin as a running back, then because he had like over 60 carries, that would be over 400 carries total for running backs. That's the most Sean McVay has ever run the ball. I kind of feel like we're going to be in that zone, but not quite 400. I think we're looking at maybe 370, 380. So maybe like 30 more carries than last year.
Well, also, Sean McVay historically doesn't like to run the ball. But we did see last year, again, out of necessity, but we did see last year he kind of got, more into that. So you're right. I think bringing in LaFleur could be like him dying to self a little bit, being like, all right, he's probably heard all of our criticisms for the past 4 years of, complaining about not running the ball more. And then last year we did run the ball, but it like I said, it was just out of just a dumpster fire, everybody getting hurt, and it was sad. But yeah, I hope that we'll see. I mean, I think that Cam Akers is going to have a good season. I do hope they utilize Kyron Williams. I think he deserves that shot. I hope, obviously, both of them stay healthy and that our entire running back room stays healthy. But it is interesting to think about because I know a lot of people have been analyzing this running back room and really trying to figure out what's going on and why did the Rams bring in Sony Michel and what does this mean, for Cam and Kyron or the run game. But we'll see. I think the Rams have an underrated running back core. I'll say that. I don't, they're not the best in the league. They're not the flashiest, but I think they're underrated. I think that people, are quick to just think it's Cam Akers and nobody else. Now he is going to be the lead back, but they do have some other options, and who knows? Maybe we'll see Zach Evans more than we're expecting. I probably wouldn't bank on it, but you never know.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's there, and like you kind of prefaced. I mean, he's there. He exists. Don't forget about him. I just think that. I think to temper your expectations is probably the best thing. And I think it would go for a guy that I don't even think we really talked about, Tre'Davious Hodges-Tomlinson. You mentioned him a little bit, but I mean, again, 6th round pick, probably shouldn't have fallen that far, but he did. And they went out and they got another corner. So it's like, this is why it's like a molding, like everything just kind of shapes itself together. It's why we'll have different thoughts as we learn more information. Our analysis will change. It's not really flip-flopping, so to speak. It's just since the draft, things have happened. They went out, they signed guys at certain positions that they drafted. That tells us that maybe it's not that they don't believe in the guys they drafted, because that's not true. It's that maybe, okay, we tested it out. We think it's best to go in this direction for this year and look at this guy for the future. And I think, what they're doing, I'm a big fan of. I wouldn't be surprised if we see DeMarcus Robinson and Ahkello Witherspoon starting against each other in training camp. I would not be shocked at all.
Well, we'll see. I mean, this is why it's so exciting that we're getting closer and closer to preseason. I mean, basically a month away, a little more, but like that's when the real fun and the real drama starts. Because then you start to see what NFL teams are actually thinking, when they start putting players out, second string, third string, and then we'll kind of know more. But yeah, I think the running back room will be something to watch in preseason. I mean, we'll get to kind of see. I mean, if you want to see Zach Evans, there's going to be hopefully, a good shot to see him. But I think it's going to do it for us. I think we just wanted to touch kind of on the different running backs in the room, which I know we will again, like I said, in preseason when we start to see kind of more what the Rams are thinking. But yeah, we'll see. We're getting closer. I mean, we're basically in July right now, guys. So we got about like a month and a week until preseason. And that means what, 2 months now away, Jake, from regular season?
I just know we're almost out of this dead period. So thank God for that.
When we saw the Witherspoon signing today, we're like, oh my God, there's something to talk about.
Content.
Literally. I mean, it's that time of year, but we'll get there, guys. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the running back room. Maybe if you guys have any predictions yourselves as to the numbers that these guys are going to put up, definitely let us know. But we'll be back next week. Until then, guys, stay safe, take care, and go Rams.